Hello, the name is Osvaldo Antonio Nyaka, and welcome to another one of the short enlightenment videos where we talk about human behavior principles and we discuss principles that govern human behavior. And the hope around these videos is that you take a bit of wisdom and apply it in your own life and see a change uh, that it might make in your life as well. So this week's principle, we are going to actually discuss the difference between inspiration and motivation, the impact that it has on your life, your psychology, as well as your physical aspect of your life when you're operating from the inspirational side or the motivational side. To kick off, let's first define the difference between the two. Inspiration, as the word says, is in spirit. Coming from in spirit is being driven by the spiritual side of the inner being of yourself. Then motivation has to do with your motor functions. This has to do with your bodily movement, and it's things that you do through your body. Now, to understand the two differences between inspiration and motivation is when you're coming from a state of inspiration, you're doing something because you love it. You're not driven by the outcome of it. Not necessarily driven by the outcome of it. You are driven by the accomplishment of a grander vision. So this is when you're coming from inspiration. Whereas when you're coming from a state of motivation, chances are that you're being led by either the pleasure principle or the pain principle of avoidance. When it comes to motivation, it is driven from the outside in, whereas inspiration is something that is driven from the inside out. And the different outcomes that you might experience with these are very different. And sometimes we tend to think that motivation is the key to success in any area of life. But in all honesty, when I study human behavior, when I look at what drives human motives or the human being to accomplish beyond what their lifetime allows them to achieve, you find that most of these people don't come from a point of motivation, but instead they come from a point of inspiration. And what are these slight differences? Let's talk about motivation for some time. So when a person comes from a state of motivation, what tends to happen is they are driven from the outside. They are externally driven. So that means you can ask them to do something. And when you ask them to do something, it has to be pleasurable, or the pleasure has to outweigh the pain of doing it, or the outcome of them doing it has to have the pleasure principle higher than the pain principle from it. So it's driven from the outside. And if someone comes from a point of doing things out of motivation, what tends to happen is they could either have burnout or they can actually develop chronic fatigue. What chronic fatigue is, a person come Thursday, come Friday, they are looking forward to not doing that activity. So in other words, they don't want to do it anymore, or by the time Friday or Thursday comes, this person is constantly tired. If you're constantly tired from specific activities, you actually need to go in and actually determine whether the activities that you're doing are inwardly driven or they're outwardly driven. And when you study power, the two dynamics of power is authentic power and pseudo power. Authentic power strives to drive someone from the inside. So what authentic power wants to do, or the driving force behind authentic power, is to look at the human being, determine what drives the human being from the inspirational point. And when you talk about pseudo power is very driven by external activities. For instance, you could say that if you're an investor and you love investing, you see that, okay, the cryptocurrency now is going up. And the events around that is that everyone is putting money into cryptocurrencies. then you jump in there and you want to put money in there because you want to make quick money because of the external world that's driving you. Whereas true authentic power, when investing, seeks to, in other words, apologies, if you're driven from the inside in the investing world, is what you're seeking to build a portfolio that best resembles what your life goals are. So you're not driven by external events. You're instead looking at what is your psychological risk level compared to what's going on in the market. And you're a true master of this. Now, how do you find your inspirational point? I always talk about the number one factor that drives human behavior is our hierarchy of values. If you look at your hierarchy of values, or how it comes about, is when you're driven from the inside, you are driven to accomplish the things that are highest on your highest value. And when you're driven by motivation, you are usually doing things that are lower down in your value structure. For instance, if your value structure says finance, then the second thing could be research, and then the third could be speaking. Any activity that you do that is around those hierarchy of values, the highest values, you're going to be inspired to want to do them. And how you see this is, the more you do those things, the more your body wants to carry on doing it. So in other words, you get more energy to carry on doing the activities that meet those highest values. I know in my case, in that I always meet my friends and they know that I can talk for hours and hours and hours around specific subjects. But if we go lower down on my value structure and we go all the way down and you ask me to do a simple thing like, okay, Osvaldo, I want you to cook for 5 days. Believe me, I'm going to find a way to make a meal that takes me less than 10 minutes. I can make you a 10 or 15-minute meal because that's not something that's valuable to me. So if you motivate me to do that, I will do that for a specific period of time, because the moment I do it, once I'm done, it's something that I want to close off. Whereas vice versa, if you go up in my hierarchy of values, you talk about researching and speaking, I could do that for hours. The more I speak, the more energy I get. But the more I cook, the less energy I get. So those activities that are lower down on my value structures are actually driven by motivation. I have to have a great motivating factor that outweighs the pain of not doing it for me to do it. So in other words, I have to be hungry enough to actually do it. Or if I do it, I know that I'm going to get an outcome that allows me to do it. But when it comes to speaking and researching, no one has to remind me or drive me from the outside. So these are the differences between inspiration and motivation. How do you then unlock the system of coming from that high inspirational point? The one thing that you can do, the first thing that you must do, is determine your values. I always refer to people to go on the internet, just type in there Dr. Demartini value determination process. And in there, within the 13 questions, it's going to give you a step-by-step process that allows you to see what your life is demonstrating. Not what you wish your life to demonstrate, but what your life is demonstrating, because your life demonstrates what your hierarchy of values are. There's not a philosopher, psychologist. His name was Alfred Adler. Well, when you study his psychology, he speaks about the fact that we organize our lifestyle to meet the most desired outcome that you want. So in other words, your lifestyle is designed to meet your hierarchy of values. And it's already there and it is actually showing. So once you go through that value determination process, it's going to show what your life demonstrates. And your life will demonstrate what your hierarchy of values are. Now, how do you then change either to change the actions that you're taking to meet that inspirational point, or you change the perception, or how do you then change the perception of the actions you're doing to meet your hierarchy of values. Now, what you'll discover is when you do your value determination process is perhaps, let's say your highest hierarchy of value is perhaps public speaking, but you don't get to do that on a daily basis, or you don't get paid to do that on a daily basis. There are two things that you can do. One is you can either change the action that leads to you being able to be paid for public speaking, or you can change the perception of the actions that you're already taking that meet that value structure. So for instance, let's suppose you've got a 9-to-5 job. And in that 9-to-5 job, you get paid a salary at the end of the day. And that salary then contributes to you being able to put out speaking content onto the world. So you're then able to link that action to your hierarchy of values. Or you can then say, well, how do I then go into full-time speaking so that action now is directly correlated to your hierarchy of values, or the value structure that seems to be the most important for you at that specific moment in time. Now, the beauty about finding out what your hierarchy of values is that it will actually show you where your highest inspirational point is. And you'll see that when you come from that highest inspirational point, you'll see that it's the activities that no one even reminds you to do them. No one ever has to tell you you have to do them. You just instinctively know that this is what I want to do. And in doing that, that's actually linked to a life mission. And suppose you're a parent, a coach, or a leader. If you want to lead from the true authentic self, where you want to build up that authentic power instead of the pseudo power, what you can do is to actually find out what the person's hierarchy of values are. You may find that someone is working at a job, but their hierarchy of values actually has being a parent at the top, maybe socializing, and financial success. So in other words, the job is not what they value most, but the job allows them to live out their hierarchy of values. And what you then want to do is, once you find out what the hierarchy of values are, is you want to speak in those value structures. You want to inspire them from those value structures so that they're able to meet those values. Because remember, the moment you come from that inspirational point, the more you want to do something. And that is how then you're able to help other people find their true authentic power, lead them through that authentic power, not the pseudo power where you're motivating them to do things that they don't love doing. But instead, you're helping them to find their inspirational point and linking that back up so that it allows them to live their true authentic self. So that's how you help other people speak or express their most authentic self, by helping them find what their highest inspirational point is, as well as finding out where yours is, so you have a conversation and not necessarily one where you're instructing them. So then you have a dialogue of two inspirational points. And that is where you are able to express yourself, when you come from your highest inspirational point. So just remember that your true authentic self is demonstrated in your hierarchy of values. And once you determine and find out what your hierarchy of values are, you're able to come and lead from a point of inspiration. Thank you, and I will see you very soon.